For RCR Wireless News, I'm Sean Kinney, and Mobile World Congress kicks off here in Barcelona in less than 24 hours. Now, ahead of the Congress, I wanted to take you through some of the major trends that our editorial team is going to be watching and covering throughout the show. First up, no surprise to anyone, artificial intelligence. It's important to remember that we're still in the very early days here, with the best certainly yet to come, but I would call your attention to some of the work we're seeing around on-device generative AI with the latest platforms from Qualcomm and MediaTek, for example. The big picture here is that you're able to run multi-billion parameter LLMs on device, which opens up some really new and interesting applications. Expect to see some of those demos out there on the show floor, but I'd also encourage you to look for the bigger story, which is really around augmentation of on-device AI capabilities with the distribution of AI compute out of the data center and towards the edge of the network. There are a lot of implications here for how networks are architected, how the combination of distributed compute for AI aligns with some existing investments, and how RANs are being decentralized. And I think you'd maybe even hear some talk around how edge AI inferencing could just be a breakout 5G use case. Speaking of 5G use cases, we're about 5 years into this particular G cycle, and fixed wireless access really stands out as something that has moved the needle in terms of monetization. The US market's a good example, but I'd also point out that FWA opportunities in the markets without extensive fiber penetration could be a big deal. I suspect we're going to see a lot of announcecements around CPEs, new radio infrastructure, and more. Another thing that would fit under that and more umbrella is this idea of RedCap, reduced capability 5G. Initially, we talked about this in the context of wearables and IoT type devices that would benefit from 5G connectivity, but might not need that multi-gig type data rate. Think more in the 200 to 500 type range. As that relates to FWA, I'd say think about CPEs with RedCap platforms in them, which would come in at a much more approachable price point and deliver very meaningful connectivity in markets where it's desperately needed. So the point there, RedCap could very well be a driving force behind the broader democratization of FWA across price tiers. And I'm sure a lot of our readers and viewers are aware, Open RAN, near and dear to me, love the topic. There's been years of work now on understanding the technical side of open interfaces in the radio network, testing of multi-vendor interoperability. We've seen lots of greenfield deployment at pretty good scale. We're starting to see green shoots in terms of brownfield deployments. And I think MWC is going to be a really good kind of point in time to check in on where we are with Open RAN. Thing that stands out to me is that the timeline, it's tricky. It's really hard to tell when this is going to break out, because it is such a material departure from the way radio networks have been built and operated for the past few decades. I do think, though, that you'll hear at the show that this architectural approach, this idea of mixing and matching RAN hardware and software vendors, will at some point become the default. I also wanted to touch on this broader move from 5G NSA to standalone with the activation of a new 5G core and the introduction of cloud-native operating principles. Again, timeline here, a bit tricky to nail down, but I do think all roads are leading us to cloud native. So what does that mean? Well, it means that operators really need to invest in software development workforce skills as these new networks become more commoditized and more IT-like. The goal here is closed-loop automation, which kind of bookends with this idea of distributing AI throughout the network. We're also on the lookout for discussions around open APIs, what exposure of and access to networks can mean in terms of cultivating a broader software development community. Could very well bring in some new ideas that could lead to more effective network monetization and value creation for end users on both the consumer and enterprise side. And folks, that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. We've got the whole team here, a full calendar of meetings, and a lot of great discussions to look forward to in the coming week. We're gonna have as close to comprehensive coverage as we can manage for you, and we're also gonna be filming a lot of videos out there on the show floor, so I'd encourage you to follow along on rcrwirelessnews.com.